Our speakers today will have 15 minutes in the first round, and they will give us an overview about the current situation of anti-Semitism in the world and in Turkey. And in the second round, our speakers will mostly talk about good practices and solutions.
We are honored and delighted to have with us Dr. Ahmed Shaheed, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief. Dr. Shaheed has been the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief since November 2016. He's the Deputy Director of Essex Human Rights Center. During his term as Special Rapporteur, he has focused on a number of thematic issues like freedom of religion or belief and sustainable development goals, gender equality, state-religion relationships, and freedom of religion or belief and national security. And I understand that a report on anti-Muslim hatred and discrimination is in the pipeline. But today we will be focusing on findings of his report of 2019 on anti-Semitism. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Shaheed. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Yıldırım. I'm delighted to be here to speak to you about my work, and also like to meet fellow panelists and other participants in this meeting. Let me begin by telling you about the work I do. As UN Special Rapporteur, I am not part of the UN. I'm an independent expert engaged by the Human Rights Council to monitor global trends in respect for freedom of religion or belief, and to report on situation to the Council. In addition to writing thematic reports for the Council and General Assembly, I also monitor violations around the world and advocate on behalf of victims. I also advise governments in terms of good practice, and also engage with the public and the media to raise public awareness about issues of concern, and also generate literacy about the normative framework for this right and of good practices that can support advancing that right. In the 4.5 years I have been on this mandate, I have focused a lot on the rising intolerance around the world on the basis of religion or belief. I have looked at various work done so far to advance the implementation of this right and looking at gaps and potentials for addressing them, including through better use of the various UN offices that have a bearing on this right. That's why I did a report most recently on the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, because the SDGs have the important aim of leaving no one behind, and discrimination on the basis of religion or any other basis would undermine that goal. So I'm arguing that to successfully achieve the SDG goals, governments and states need to look at respecting freedom of religion or belief, among other human rights. The other reports I have done include examining government efforts to counter violent extremism and what impact that has on human rights, especially on the right to freedom of religion or belief. I've also looked at the impact or the nexus between protecting gender equality and promoting non-discrimination and promoting freedom of religion or belief, largely because very often that women have equal rights to men in the area of religion is not well understood, or not least well focused on. And my current research is on, as you heard, on a report on anti-Muslim hatred and or Islamophobia, and will be presented to the Human Rights Council in March this year. In October 2019, I produced a report on anti-Semitism after engaging in a range of consultations around the world with Jewish communities and others who had views on this subject. And the reason for my report was that I noticed a couple of things. Number one, that anti-Semitism, as with other intolerance, was on the rise. And my report was produced in November 2019. And in the 18 months leading up to it, we had a number of violent incidents that highlighted how violent anti-Semitism can sometimes be. I also noticed that the mandate which I hold, which goes back some 20 odd years now, has not really engaged much with Jewish communities. And so the need to look at how Jewish communities experience their right to freedom of belief was something I was very keen to look at. In terms of the main findings in my report, of course, I detail out a variety of ways in which anti-Semitism is manifested. So first of all, there are the historical tropes about Jews, and these are drawn often from religious narratives or twisted religious narratives. And then there are more modern forms of it. Of course, the historical narratives have also have morphed over time. In different centuries, anti-Semitic tropes and stereotypes seem to change, but they have something in common, and that is to accuse Jews of conspiracy theories, of grand conspiracies, of being too powerful or very powerful. At the same time, being attacked because they're not seen to be powerful. So at the same time, they're accused of being very powerful and manipulative. Same time, they've been targeted because they're seen to be weak and can be attacked. But something that really struck me were the contemporary forms of anti-Semitism, as a consequence of which, across the entire political spectrum, from far right to the left wing, you find deeply embedded anti-Semitic prejudice throughout the political spectrum. So contemporary anti-Semitism is often manifested as a human rights argument. That is, it is sometimes framed as advancing children's rights, maybe even advancing animal rights. And we have, for example, opposition to male circumcision framed as a human right, as a children's, as a child right issue, or opposition to kosher food, ritual slaughter, framed as, again, as an animal right. So again, used in different frames, but in a way that undermines some of the key aspects of Jewish identity and Jewish beliefs. Then, of course, there is the issue of the Jews being targeted out of actions linked to Israel. So Israel-linked anti-Semitism is also quite widespread phenomenon, especially in Western European campuses or Western campuses, be it North America or Western Europe, where activism on behalf of Palestinian rights morphs into harassment, even attacks on Jewish academics and Jewish students. So that often comes as an idea framed as a right, but essentially betraying deep-seated prejudice toward Jews. And of course, you have in the Muslim communities too, and as you find in some of the conservative Christian communities, again, deep-seated anti-Semitic tropes. Even countries where there may be no Jews, you find the people harboring anti-Semitic, conspiracy theories and anti-Semitic hatred. So there is for almost an anti-racism that comes. There's almost a racism, anti-racist frame used to be racist towards Jews. So this is a very, very complex phenomenon. And then, of course, the online dimension today, all forms of hatred are multiplied, manifold, because people have anonymity and people can frequently use and easily use these platforms. The online dimension is quite, if you like, widespread in the way that they disseminate anti-Semitic tropes and hatred. And we found many instances in which the online incitement to hatred and violence manifested itself in offline acts of violence. And again, here, of course, Jewish communities are not, if you like, special in this sense. All communities can get targeted through online hatred coming onto offline acts of violence. But I find this to be quite widespread across communities. I also found that in some countries, there was an effort being made to document, to address this violence, to address anti-Semitic hatred, to document violations, and to respond with supportive measures. In other countries, the efforts were less clear. So there were more gaps in legal framework, more gaps in police understanding of the issue, a huge gulf between the Jewish communities themselves and the majority communities and the law enforcement officials, because they're not seen to be understanding enough of the situation they're facing. Also, in many liberal democracies, it wasn't uncommon to find Jewish cultural centers, Jewish schools, targets of attack, and therefore highly in need of security measures. And then many of the people I met, including children I spoke with, shared with me, the experiences of facing everyday racism as Jewish individuals. So it was quite a widespread issue. So I argued that anti-Semitism is toxic to democracy wherever it goes unchecked, because it's essentially, it's about othering people. It's about rejecting equality. It's about dehumanizing other people that are people in a weaker situation, and rejecting the human rights framework. And it's about conspiracy theories, finding someone to blame. And we saw in the COVID pandemic how quickly, when under stress, communities would turn to a minority for scapegoating, blaming someone for their fears. So this is quite destructive of democracy, quite damaging for society, and therefore I was calling for a global effort to take a human rights perspective to this issue. Human rights perspective is important for two reasons. First of all, we're not asking for anything special for any community. We're asking for every community to be allowed to enjoy their equal rights. So it's about non-discrimination, about equal dignity, equal rights for everybody. Second, even the measures we take, of course, must comply with human rights standards. So they must come within the human rights framework. So there is equal protection for everybody. One of the key things I also highlighted was the important role of education and awareness raising in combating this form of racism, as with any form of racism. Awareness raising is important. So I found that in many contexts, people didn't really understand, how people's actions can become anti-Semitic. So the idea of awareness raising for me zeroed down on using the working definition of anti-Semitism used by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance 5 years back, as a non-legal tool to raise awareness and for education. But of course, there are certainly aspects in it that need to be, I think, put into law as well. But the starting point is to make sure there's awareness and education about how people can become anti-Semitic and how that can impact upon rights of Jewish communities. And of course, finally, I also had recommendations that looked at the broader education sector, the UN system, governments and others as a way to address this problem. I will end here and then see what comments and questions you may have for me in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive presentation. We heard about the situation and the trends and the complexity of the issue around the world. But now we will turn our attention to
Betsy Penso, you're welcome. We are very honored to have you here with us. Betsy Penso is a lawyer. Since 2016, she has been working to combat anti-Semitism in Turkey and around the world. And she is one of the writers and editors of Avlaremoz, which was established in order to combat anti-Semitism and also raise awareness about the minorities in Turkey and Jews. So we would like to hear about your experience. What is the situation in Turkey about anti-Semitism? Is there any pattern, any recurring pattern? What about the legal protection offered in Turkey? Do you believe it is sufficient? Over to you. Well, thank you very much. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Ahmed Shaheed for his presentation, but also for his report. And I see very familiar faces, so to speak, in the participant list. So I'm very happy to see them as well. Today, I will focus mostly on anti-Semitism in Turkey. By definition, anti-Semitism manifests itself in every way. anti-Semitism can be defined as discrimination, hatred, and violence against Jewish people. So there is this is a wide range of practice that ranges from hostility to prejudice, to believe in conspiracy theories, to have a sympathy with Nazis. Unfortunately, in Turkey, discrimination and crimes against Jews is not taken seriously. The public prosecutors do not initiate legal cases ex officio, and in most cases, the lawsuits that are filed result in lack of prosecution or non-prosecution. And also, the victims of these crimes do not really file lawsuits because they do not have trust in the system, but they also lack the confidence themselves. So they may hesitate. Some groups, they are not really aware that hate speech or hate crime qualifies as a crime by itself. Some others, they are hesitant to disclose their Turkish ID numbers. I will give you a couple of examples and cases, but I would like to first tell you more about Avlaremoz. And I'm the editor of Avlaremoz. This is an online platform that was established not only by Jewish community, but many other communities. Avlaremoz is mostly concerned about anti-Semitism, and we always try to be a platform to document and archive anti-Semitism. This being the case, over time, we have become an independent civil society organization. As Avlaremoz, to the extent possible, we do document and report on anti-Semitism, especially online anti-Semitism. We also monitor columns, op-eds, cartoons, and sometimes we use didactic means or tools to expose them. And of course, this includes political statements, political discourse. And I do not see any problem in arguing that we are quite confident in that. We are very courageous in that, indeed, to be able to carry out such a study. Every year, we monitor and disclose the most anti-Semitic incident. And in a way, we do naming and shaming by disclosing this information. And every year, we have the most anti-Semitic incident of the year questionnaire. We open this for voting. And in this way, we select the most anti-Semitic incident in order to remind people of what had happened during that year. So here you can see the pie chart for the anti-Semitic incidents of 2020. So the top incident that got 30% of the votes is the narrative included in Hüsnü Mahalli's book titled Palestine is Mine. So in this book, Mr. Mahalli argues that the gas chambers were there in place for the purpose of treating Jews with typhus, and he also claims that not as many Jews were exterminated. And this is quite an exhaustive list, I have to say. So any anti-Semitic incident in different category, we can see are already coming to the surface in 2020. And we can also see there is Holocaust denial and some referrals to the Holocaust. For instance, in 2017, Aykut Işıklar, in his column, he made a reference to Holocaust. He posted a tweet informing us that Ukraine has lifted visa obligations for the Turkish citizens. So the first Turkish tourists arriving will need to stop by these touristic furnaces. So he thought that he was making a joke by making this referral. On Twitter, we have also another joke going on about burning the Jews. So these are tweets about increased utility bills for electricity. So that they believe that they have perhaps burned some Jews so that they got high bills. And other than that, we have some areas, Osman Bey, Kurtuluş, where there is a high prevalence of Jewish inhabitants. And we can see some defamations or insults written on the walls, so we do close them. So we can see in this photo an example of a t-shirt with swastika logo. And another example is the Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. So this is widely available in Turkey, even on discount, without any preface, without any footnote. And now that the copyrights for Mein Kampf got expired, almost every publication house prints this book. And I do believe that this is quite a profitable business for them because it is widely available. And there is yet another pattern of narrative which is employed by oppositional parties. So the opposition party members blame President Erdogan for having received the Care to Courage Award that includes Muharrem İnce and Meral Akşener. These are the opposition party leaders. So they basically use this blame that President Erdogan received a Care to Courage Award, and it is not acceptable that President collaborates with the Jewish community or Jewish organizations. But in fact, this Care to Courage Award is granted to individuals who saved the lives of Holocaust survivors. And in fact, this was given to a specific person, but the president of the country received that on behalf of this person. So we can see that the word Jewish itself can be used as an insult word or a swear word. For instance, again, in order to insult a political party, HDP leader, Sezai Temelli, another MP asked the question, is he a Kurdish or is he a Jew? So we can see that Jewish, the word Jewish can be used as a swear word. We can also see that many people do some Google searches, and to our understanding is that people are trying to figure out if those people have a Jewish descent or not. And we can also see that the words Armenian, Greek, or Jewish can be used as swear words, and we can also see that some groups of people in Turkey can put the blame on minorities because of the earthquakes or other disasters. There is yet another pattern that we observe in Turkey, and this is the practice of anti-Semitism over the state of Israel. this is already entrenched in the daily practice. Whenever there is a tension between Turkey and Israel, or whenever there is an operation in Gaza, we can see them rising. For instance, President Erdogan stated his opinion about Mr. Trump's deal of the century that was brokered by Palestine and Israel. So at that time, President Erdogan criticized those who collaborate with Jews. Likewise, as a result of attention on Twitter, again, he also portrayed the Jewish community with bad connotations, and he also warned about the security and safety of synagogues in Turkey. We have also experienced some physical assaults by Alperen Ocakları. This is an ultra-nationalistic group that undertakes vandalism. So they came to the doors of the Jewish organization, they pounded the doors. It was not possible to identify them all. There was a prosecution, but they only received the minimum sentences. By the way, in Thrace and Anatolia, there are some cemeteries without the community, and we know that they are being subject to assault and vandalism, but they are not really newsworthy. We do not only see physical assault, we can also see cyber vandalism during a riot at a synagogue, or during a live broadcast during a wedding. We can see acts of cyber vandalism. Of course, we need to take into account the fake accounts without the correct usernames. And we know that they almost sure that there will be impunity, they will not receive any punishment, so they continue to spread hate. So this is about conspiracy theories. This is a photo taken in a bus, and this conspiracy theory argues that the virus was spread from the Jews. And of course, there are lots of conspiracy theories and plots that the world is dominated and run by the Jews. And there are also some anti-Semitic patterns unique to Turkey. One we can see in education. And of course, we do not only see anti-Semitism, we can also see the hatred against Greeks, Armenians, and Kurds as well. So during the general election, our citizens went to schools, to public schools, to cast their votes, and these primary schools or secondary schools, on their walls, there are some posters about Jews, that a Jew is someone who betrays, who never keeps the promise. This is yet another example. I don't know where exactly this photo was taken from. I believe this is a summer school of girls, and they make these little girls chant "Death to Jews." This is a video. It was widely circulated on the internet, and we have not really heard any prosecution whatsoever. We do not only see anti-Semitism in school, in education, this can be included in some other domains. TRT, Turkish National TV channel, has a TV series called Sultan Abdülhamid, and it uses particular language against minorities in the Ottoman Empire. That includes Jews, Armenians, Greeks, and this TV series once again reproduces this narrative, and they include those characters. For instance, they have a Jewish character, but this character is always unreliable, not trustworthy. And we can also see that this TV series has an impact on people, and we can see those implications on the social media. This is all I would like to tell you. And I will be very happy if you can follow us as Avlaremoz. These are our social media accounts. Thank you very much. It is quite striking to see all these examples one after another. Mr. Shaheed will need to leave us in 5 minutes. That's why I will turn to him with this question. You heard about the examples in Turkey, and we know that you have recommendations to governments, media, civil society, but what would be your specific recommendations for Turkey, and what are the good practices you can share with us around the world? We will be very happy if you can respond to that.
Thank you very much. Betsy Penso's presentation is such a reality check as to what's happening in Turkey, but also the case I think with some other countries as well. And my apologies for having to leave early. I've got to go to a meeting in Cairo with the Vatican and Cairo on launching a book on religious freedom for this afternoon. In terms of what I would recommend, as I said in my report, I think it's vitally important that people recognize the multiple dimensions of this problem. So first of all, there is an awareness raising and education problem, beginning with adopting the IRA working definition. So we understand that any form of anti-Jewish racism is not permissible. It has to be either criminalized or combated. If it doesn't meet the threshold of criminal sanction through speech, for example, then it must be countered by political leaders and others standing up for Jewish communities. It's also important to take a human rights perspective to understand that every human being is entitled to equal dignity. And therefore, just because someone's faith or race or ethnicity or whatever is different is no reason to be targeted by other people. So the human rights perspective is vitally important. Equally important, of course, is providing security because the community is under attack in many places. And security here means, of course, starting with the incitement to violence. You should never let incitement to violence go, unaddressed. It must be challenged. And the better it is done by political leaders in challenging it, the more effective it is. And of course, engaging the community to make sure they also have agency and can actually, be part of this. I found the best examples are coming out of Norway. I'm not saying it because I'm speaking to you, but if you look at my report, I highlight the 5-year action plan that ended last year in Norway, which is quite comprehensive. It's multidisciplinary, so it has legal aspects, it has educational aspects. It looks at the classroom, the workplace, the synagogues, and so on and so forth. So a multi-pronged plan that looks at legal aspects and also educational aspects. Education is so important because we're not simply talking about, the Holocaust. We're talking about a community that is here now, a community like any of us, contributing and partaking now in our society and have equal stake in society. So to understand the full complexity and richness of Jewish contribution to society has to be understood. So it must be empathy generating. And I always emphasized that there's always good practice in all parts of the world. I found examples in Morocco where the government is helping rebuild the community, in Tunisia where government provides security, in Western Europe, Germany, I mentioned Norway here, same with Sweden, the Education Living History Forum is a good example. Also in North America, where political leaders are supporting the Jewish community's rights. It goes totally wrong when leading politicians or heads of political parties take to anti-Semitism. That's highly dangerous. So that's the, if you like, the worst practice. Good practice when they become allies and champions of combating anti-Semitism. And again, recommend the UNESCO's educational tool for school contexts and the IRA working definition as a non-legal tool to support people understand the problem and respond to the problem. I am so sorry I have to leave now, but I'm really thrilled to have been able to come and talk to you about this. I look forward to staying in touch with you on how I can collaborate with you on this and other aspects of mutual interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you. And let me also quickly say that we are hoping that once the pandemic is over, that you might consider carrying out a country visit to Turkey, because it was in 1999 when the then Special Rapporteur paid a visit to Turkey and issued a country report, and it's overdue.
I think it is, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Bye.
So we may continue. Betsy, Penso, actually, after all the points that you have mentioned, I had a few others. I wanted to say a few other things after the things that you have mentioned, but then I wanted to give our guest, Mr. Shaheed, the floor as he was supposed to leave. So let me come back to my words. We do see those kind of events happening in Turkey, and Avlaremoz is quite a young publication in order to underline the issue, increase the visibility of the topic, and provide informative resources in that. But at the same time, as Dr. Shaheed also mentioned, governments do have positive responsibility in dual aspects. First of all, they need to protect especially the faith centers and the schools, and then providing the security for everyone. The governments do have the positive responsibility to ensure this happening, and unless this does not happen, and the communities, they have to provide their own security, this becomes to be quite expensive for them. And also impunity is very important to be avoided. When we look at the Turkish criminal code, we do see that destroying or causing damage to the faith centers and cemeteries has been taken up as a crime in the relevant provision, and if it can become to be an aggravated crime when it aims denigration. And also there is another provision that deals with inciting people to hatred and to animosity, but this is never being applied in Turkey, or not being used in an effective manner. That is to say, in Turkey, even though we do have the legal instruments to fight against those type of crimes, they're not being used. And the wrong information, lack of information, need to be challenged, and the prejudiced attitudes need to be changed. And in order to do this, proactive steps need to be taken forward. And the first thing that we can think of would be education, of course. So I'd like to come back to you once again to talk about the good examples in Turkey in terms of civil society or policies introduced by the lawmakers in Turkey. What can we talk about? What can we say about this? There had been some questions that were written to me from the private chat box. Let me try to respond to you. After the attack against the Neve Shalom synagogue, I was asked whether provision 216 was used to bring a case against this attack. No, the case was brought to the court against by using Article 153, crimes committed against the faith centers and the cemeteries, and 1 year of conviction. That was the court verdict. I don't know whether the person was imprisoned or not. If I'm to come back to your question that you've just raised, what the civil society is doing and the government is doing, let me start with the government. There's an International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRO as we call it. Turkey wants to be a member to this organization. Turkey is now an observer, and there are certain liabilities in order to become a member. For example, every year a Holocaust event in remembrance of the Holocaust, an event is being carried out. None of them, and there are some other events that are taken place. None of them are major events, but are there such events? Yes, there are. But I do believe that the attempts or the events carried out, the actions carried out by the civil society are much more valuable, because if we're going to create a change, this change will come through the society. And as Avlaremoz was established for this purpose, I believe it has a very reputable place in internet environment. And there is another civil society named as Dur, halt, or stop. Even before the government, they started having remembrance days for Holocaust at the Galatasaray, in front of the Galatasaray neighborhood. I don't exactly remember when they got started, but something happened. After 1.5 years, they've started these remembrance days. Somebody complained and sued this event back in 2018, and 6 of my friends, our colleagues who participated in that remembrance, they were taken to trial for participating in that event, and the indictment was stating that they have been participating in a terrorist activity, quite naturally, because they were kind of threatened by participating in that event. They haven't been participating in such activities. And SEHAK, this is a civil society fighting for the rights. They are pioneers, maybe the unique example. They do have lots of materials because of the collaboration they have with the Anne Frank Society. They are training the trainers, and for 3 years or 4 years long, they've had different projects, and they had 10,000 applications, and they trained 600 individuals. And in time, probably this number will be increasing any further. And Hrant Dink Foundation is another the NGO that we need to mention. They have more comprehensive coverage, professional network report, and about antisemitism report that they have published based on statistics and scientific research. So they're much more established than Avlaremoz. I'm not talking about the mainstream media, but the other media, rather than anti-Semitism, the experiences, the old Jewish neighborhood, more romantic topics, but I believe that this is still valuable in terms of creating some visibility. That's all I would like to tell at the moment. If you would have further questions, we may continue based on your questions. Thank you very much. We do have questions. So now we've concluded our presentations. I would like to remind you once again, you may reach us via chat box. If you may put your name or your agency or your position, that would be very good. Let me start with this question. A question for Betsy. Turkey opened up its doors to hundreds of Jewish scientists running away from the Nazi Germany. Turkey became to be the homeland. If there had been anti-Semitism back during those days, this wouldn't have had been possible. What had changed since then, and what is the reason for anti-Semitic's stand increasing, and what is the role of the popular political stance at this moment? First of all, there's a mistake. Let's talk about this. Yes, that's true. Some scientists during the Second World War, they came to Turkey, but there had been some that couldn't arrive to Turkey, that were kept in the vessels whose ships were floated away or sank, and they were not even allowed to pass through Turkey as a passenger. So yes, that is true. Some scientists, Jewish scientists, were allowed in, but we can't say that anti-Semitism didn't exist back then. What had been changed since then? Many things. Holocaust was over, and Israel state was established, and the measures that were taken, and the Israeli government developed a position to protect themselves, and the Jews became to be more conscious, and the majority of the population, of the Jewish population, migrated from Turkey, can be counted as the reasons of this change. Another question is coming from Istanbul Metropolitan City Municipality, from the Belief Center. What can we do as local administration to fight against anti-Semitism? A very good question. I prefer working with the young people on a civil society, on a more civilian perspective would be better. What are the problems? We may ask this question, and what would be the most frequently encountered problems in the neighborhoods where the Jewish population is more dense? For example, swastika symbols, we need to be reporting them, for example. Maybe we can work in coordination with them. Maybe while we are going to paint it, going to cover it with paint, maybe we can organize something more interesting with messages embedded in it. So, or to, instead of applying to the rabbi's office and asking somebody to be appointed, maybe working with the young people at the local level would be more valuable. Thank you very much for those creative ideas. In the meanwhile, we are continuing to get our questions, but I also do have a question that I'd like to raise. The young people who are contributing to Avlaremoz initiative, they are, you said that they're coming from different communities, not only from the Jewish community. The young people who are participating in this experience, what type of, how they are enriched or how they are affected with their participation? A very good question, but I'm not quite sure about the answer. Let me try to respond to you. Avlaremoz, when it was established, it was really the fact that none of the participants knew each other beforehand. They just wanted to do something for the Jewish society. Some of them were being leftists, some of them were being rightist, some of them had nothing to do with any one of those topics. Some of them were Zionists, and those people, they became friends, they disputed, they agreed, they disagreed, and they started understanding each other better. They've started better understand each other, why leftists do not like certain things, why certain reactions are being put forward by the Zionists, and some people left the group. And at least for myself, I can talk about myself, it helped me to understand my political tendency. But actually, to tell you the truth, we're a perfect, we can perfectly be described as an internet platform. Most of the time, we do not see each other. We just correspond via WhatsApp and communicate via Zoom. So I do not know how exactly other young people are being influenced by us, but the people who are living abroad, who are more educated, they like reading us and who like contributing to our efforts. And this is quite valuable for me. I hope this will continue as it is at the moment. Another question. I just want to read before I read it aloud. This question is coming from Reshat Çöteli from Nates University. I'm working as a football observer in the southern part of France. While we're talking about the documentaries of Netflix, from football to many other domains, and as a Turkish Jewish community, have you ever produced a small-scale content that can be broadcasted via these channels that broadcast to different communities? Schnitzel and unorthodox, those are the type of major productions that reached large-scale communities. It only reflects Haredits, the most orthodox community. It does not reflect the majority of the population living in Turkey, Ladino language, Hardana community. There are different documentaries. There are some other very good documentaries that have been prepared. For example, Susam, Sesame, for the first time, a short film is having a theme of the Jewish people, none of which reflect the Turkish Jewish people, I should say. And it's a difficult thing to reflect the Turkish Jewish people with a film, but if you would like to get more insider information, the Fifth Element Foundation that have been updated, you can listen to the music, you can watch the content, some content, and you can get the food recipes. There's a library of books and films. I'm sure you would be able to benefit from that. That is true. I've participated in the Galata tour and visit different synagogues. That was an opportunity. Of course, the Jewish community trying to introduce themselves is a way, but there are other parts of the community that is the responsibility to fight against anti-Semitism. And the other religious groups may think other things to find a solution to this problem, or they can have a common denominator that they can work on together. And I believe it would be very good food for thought for further action to be taken. Our time is moving fast, and I would like to ask you another question. Maybe this would be a very interesting question, an optimistic question on my side. This is my question. In order to select the what should we be doing in order to have a Turkey where we should not be selecting the most anti-Semitic event to be chosen? What should we do for that? Every year we hope for the same thing, but I believe every year, even though minor, there would always be some events taking place. But I believe the most important thing is that the politicians should not be inciting the society having violent effects against the Jewish community or the Armenian community or any kind of community. And at the same time, intellectuals and the academicians making use of those concepts in a proper way, media using those concepts in a proper way. And Jews should not be considered as a part of the diversity mosaic, but rather should be treated and should be named as the equal parts, elements of the society. And I think for your targets, the year would be 2071, I guess. I hope that won't be too long and we will be able to achieve this target much sooner. I would like to thank all our speakers and for all our participants for participating in this webinar. Many more participants than we've expected got registered and participated, and this gave us the opportunity that there is interest in discussing and listening to these topics. And I would like to thank Funda Tekin and Lauren Olgar for the organization of this effort. And I would like to thank our interpreters, Kutlay Bensan and Burcu Becermen, for being our interpreters. And in order to be aware of, in order to follow up our activities, İnanç Özgürlüğü website and on Twitter you can follow us. Our next webinar will be on 11th of February. It will be about the freedom of religion and belief. Our speakers will be from Marmara University, Associate Professor Tolga Şirin, and from the European Security Cooperation and Security Organization, and Germana Seta, advisor on the topic of animosity against Islam and the Muslims. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you very much for your participation.